Welcome to Experts Explain Trauma. Today we've got Dr. Bethany Bilodeau joining us. She is an expert on helping parents understand their struggling children. And we're diving into questions parents quietly ask themselves and give helpful tips on helping our children. Welcome, Dr. Bethany. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you here and what we're going to talk about.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I'm truly honored that you asked me to be on the show.
Oh, I love what you do. So why don't you quickly tell us, before we get into the question, why don't you quickly tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit of what we're going to kind of talk about?
So I'm an expert in human behavior, and my role is really to operate as a behaviorist. So I go into school settings and home settings, and I work with families and children, typically those with complex backgrounds that have challenging behaviors. And I really help the families and the youth kind of get through those struggling times and really find better strategies that oftentimes take less time and energy than the strategies they've been using in order to get themselves to a better place. And I do the same thing with school districts.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean, actually, this kind of stuff should be taught in school, I swear. If we can't teach it at home, right?
Be much easier, yeah.
Seriously, that and teaching our kids how to balance a checkbook,
Yeah.
you know?
I often say in my head, this is to keep us from making sure that our children stay safe. Because, like, when my children were small, I would often say, for your health and safety, mommy needs to go to work.
Oh, there you go. I love it. I love it. Okay, so we've got our first question. What are some of the signs of stress or trauma in children that often get mistaken for personality, attitude, or just being difficult?
Well, my favorite one is oppositional defiance, probably. I'm often brought into school situations and or home environments where people will say, this kiddo is just oppositional defiant. They just don't want to take authority, so on and so forth. And typically it actually comes from a place of fear. Usually this child is operating in crisis. Oftentimes the adults supporting the child, because it's been so stressful, are also operating in a place of crisis. And because of that, everybody's overly anxious and everything else. And many times the kiddo just says no before they can even get to that point, or they seem oppositional defiant. And in a lot of ways too, there's this little area of the brain called the anterior cingulate gyrus. And that's an area of the brain that allows it to shift, to go from one gear to another, to transition from, say, a play activity to an academic activity, or off of a video game into dinner and things like that. And if that area of the brain doesn't shift well, either because of hormonal issues or because it just takes a longer time for it to shift, or because of processed foods or lack of hydration, all of those things, that individual is going to present with a no or with a refusal or with an attitude before they can even get to the next thing, even if it's something preferred. Say you were going to say, hey, let's go out to dinner. No, and oftentimes they don't want to say no, but it just comes out because that part of the brain doesn't have time to move. So some great strategies for that, or provide the expectation and then give the person a few moments to just let it settle in. And the reason why is because it needs to settle into the subconscious. Usually takes about 30 seconds. So I'll say, provide an expectation. Hey, we've got dinner in 5 minutes, and then step away so that even if there is a refusal or a defiance, you're not party to it at that point. You've stepped away. So you don't have to actually respond to it. So give them that few moments for it to settle in. The other option is that they could provide a distraction at that time. So say that they, say dinner's in 5 minutes, and then, oh my gosh, what is this you happen to be looking at? This looks really fascinating. I love the way the graphics are engaged in this. This is awesome. Who made this? And distract them with something and then say, oh yeah, by the way, it's dinner time. Let's go. And then they'll be able to transition without providing that oppositional defiance side of them.
I often say that people act out for a reason, right? They don't just wake up one day and decide, okay, I'm going to act out today. I mean, there's a reason why, especially children, especially because they don't have the maturity yet to express themselves. And, and so the little brain thing you were talking about is that delay, or whatever you want to call it, is that a maturity thing? Is that something,
It
or is
can
that from
be.
trauma?
It can be, yes, absolutely. I mean, I definitely see it more with my individuals who have had really complex traumatic backgrounds,
Mhm.
higher anxiety individuals for sure. I also see it with kids who are really in a state of hypervigilance and adults too who are in a state of hypervigilance. If I walk into, say, a classroom and a teacher is telling me that's not going to work, we've tried that, I don't want to do that again, that's going to add more to my plate, that's really that individual who's
Mm.
in that state of crisis a lot of the time where they can't shift either. They can't shift gears. And sometimes it's a matter of just presenting an idea and then letting it lay for a period of time. And then they'll come back around and say, I thought of that and it might work. What if we did it like this? And then provide it in a different way. So for sure. And I see it, it's much more prevalent in people in the last few years than I saw it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. And I definitely think that's just a sign of the time. The overstimulation that people are experiencing, the busier lives, the reduced sleep that we've had. I mean, we sleep significantly less in this day and age than we did, say, 50 years ago. It's about 2 hours
Yeah.
less a night. So.
Yeah, and there's, and today too, even from when I was growing up, there's just so much going so fast.
So
We've got
much.
social media, we've got TV. There's just so much coming at us. I feel like, my poor grandbabies, I look at them and I just see all this stuff coming at them, and it's overwhelming. And I love that, you know, we need to, it's almost like sometimes we kind of need to treat kids almost like an adult, in that we need to give them the respect, we need to give them the space, and the time. And I love that you say, like, you know talking them through it, getting them distracted, and then bringing them back around. Because it's funny when you were saying that, I was thinking about that, because I see one of my daughter-in-laws doing that with the grandchildren, and she kind of does that little workaround, and it seems to work. Because I have
That's
one
good.
grandson who tends to be a little more emotional than the
Mhm.
others, and she's really good about giving him space, giving him a voice, trying to help him articulate what's going on inside of him. I just love that, because I know that in the past it would be parents screaming at this child, right?
Right.
Not my
Yep.
my daughter-in-law, but other parents. I've seen it,
Right. Yeah.
of screaming at him. And just I mean, imagine yourself, you're flustered, you can't think straight, and you got someone screaming at you.
It just increases the stress. Like I've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people who have selective mute, and people will say, uncover your face. You need to answer that, so on and so forth. And it's like, oh, please
Oof.
don't do that. That's so damaging for them. It's just and it's well-meaning, well-intentioned. They want that person to
Right.
have a voice. It comes from a beautiful place where they care about the person, but on the flip side of it, it does damage to that person and causes them intense trauma because they're in that state of crisis at that point in time, and they really need us to meet them where they're at, and vice versa. Life isn't comfortable, we all know that, and when things are uncomfortable, that tends to be when we're growing the most, and we all know that too. But we don't have to suffer through it. Things can be uncomfortable,
That's a
but we
good
don't have to
point.
suffer.
Yeah, we don't have to suffer. And so much of this too is kind of learned behavior too, because I think about, my generation, right? And I raised a millennial, and I just remember my generation is how kids were treated is so different than how we're trying to do it today. And that's what, a lot of part of my podcast is about, is to help people do things different than what they've been doing in the
Yeah.
past. And this is an area that I feel like it's kind of new. I wish this was around back in the day when I was raising my son. I made a lot of very good, conscious choices with him, you know, not making choices out of trauma. But there's things I still could have done a lot better. And had I known this information, it would have helped me. But that's what I love about this, is that this is not a judgment on the parents or anything like that. This is what you know. Here's a different way to do it.
Absolutely. People do the best they can with the resources that they have. And we're lucky that we've had the time and energy to be able to develop all of these strategies, and
Yeah.
they're backed with science. And we've been able to really put a lot of time and energy into developing them to ensure that they're going to be effective. And they're very different from how we would operate nowadays. And even, I mean, I have 2 adult children and 2 young children. And when I get stressed, I fall back into my old patterns of, I need for you to do that. Let's go. I said now, da 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 da. And then I have to really check myself. And although my daughters are really good about checking me too, but but I have to check myself and back up, and they'll say, Mom, where are you feeling that stress? And and so on and so forth. And
Woo!
we'll
Good
have a
job, Mom.
conversation. Yeah. And we'll have a conversation about it. And I'll say, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
talk to you that way. This came from me, not from you. And take some responsibility about it, but also figure out, like, why is this bothering me so much?
Mm-hmm.
What paradigm am I operating out of? Where is this hitting in my fear area that is causing me to do that? So I have a
Look who
friend.
showed up. There he is. I love it. Oh, just made an appearance and just left. That's so funny.
She said, you called.
Yeah, you called. Oh, and he made me forget my question. That's funny.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Animals are always welcome. Trust me. I would always welcome them. No, I was just thinking when you were saying about, your daughter saying that to you. I mean, how beautiful is that, right? And that's the thing. Oh, that's what I was going to say. You made a point of, you go back to your children, you apologize. And that is a game changer. That is a game changer. And I'll say this real quick story. I've said it before on my podcast, but I think it's really kind of relevant. Is I remember my son was he must have been about 8 or 9. And I remember as a child being raised to believe that adults were always right. That's what I was told. Adults are always right. You don't argue with them. So I just did. But then I'm witnessing these adults doing stupid stuff. And so that was confusing to me. So fast forward to my son being about 8 years old, and we're in the car, and my dad's with me. And I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember thinking about that. And I said to my son, I said, well, honey, that adults make mistakes. Moms made mistakes. And then my dad even piped in and said, I've made mistakes. And the wonder on my son's face, he's like, what? They do? I don't know where he got that belief, because that's not something I put into him, but that's kind of a belief that goes there. So what's beautiful is that I broke that belief, which was not true. But also, when I've made mistakes, I've gone to my son and told him and apologized to him. And there's something so healing about that.
There really is. It's huge for kids, I think, because we grow up feeling like our parents are perfect. And
Yes.
regardless of all their flaws. And that, unfortunately, creates an environment where it's very easy to be abused. It's very easy to have really traumatic things happen to you that you don't often realize are trauma issues until, you're 40, 50, 60 years old
I know,
down
right?
the road, versus having some really open dialogue with your kids and saying, yeah, I wish I hadn't parented this way. Or, here's another choice I could have made in that situation. And hopefully, times are changing, and hopefully we're moving more towards that as parents, so that our children have a better view on where we're at and everything else as they grow up and as we grow up.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love this. Well, thank you, Dr. Bethany. This has been great. I love the series that we're doing on helping parents and helping children. And, I think it's just a wonderful thing.
Me too.
Do you have any questions for our experts? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so that you can get more insightful information on trauma healing.